And now I want to welcome up Maurice Broaddus, who's I've told him, and I have not done it all along, but he just a little tiny bit as he walks up here. He's a writer and a leader in our community in Indianapolis. So here's Maurice. How about a hand for Maurice?
Thank you, everybody. Let's see if I can do this. That's me. Thank you. So I'm gonna start with a bit of a confession. So I write for a reason. Speaking is not what I do, just so you all know. So me and Jim are working at cross purposes because he's like, oh, we want to have all the attention directed on you. And I'm like, no, I have slides to distract them from me. And if I wasn't in my own head bad enough, I'm sitting here, I'm trying to think, and I'm like, all right, get into the moment. And then my son leans over and he's just like, hey, that Lorenzo dude last night, the architect, he has such a better voice than you. And I'm like, yeah, he's up front. Right. So who is Maurice Broaddus? So I am, as Jim said, I'm an author. I'm a teacher over at the Oaks Academy Middle School. I also work at the Kepler Institute. My most recent book, which just came out last week. Sweep of Stars. It's the first in my Astra Black trilogy, and it is my utopian novel. Well, that's all I'll say about that. It's been the fruition of, I think, of a lot of what I've been about and a lot of what I've been working towards. I'm also the author of a middle grade series, The Usual Suspects. I've also wrote Pimp My Airship, for which I won the Indiana Authors Award for genre fiction. And I've had published over 100 shorts. Actually, you know what? I'll do my middle school bio, because my middle school students only think I have 3 credits. One, I was a consultant for the video game Watch Dogs 2, so I get a full credit for that. I wrote a short story for the Black Panther anthology. They'll give me full credit for that. And I get half a credit for writing literally a middle grade series just so they could read, but I get half a credit for that. So that's me as an author. But I'm also the resident Afrofuturist at the Kepler Institute. And I love introducing myself as an Afrofuturist because people are like, oh yeah, you're the Afrofuturist at the Kepler, and they'll nod. And I'm like, you have no idea what that means, do you? And it's like, nah, but it sounds really impressive. And it is. Because, okay, so here's the thing, is like many organizations, they have futurists on staff. People who use like their vision and their skill set to just consider, new alternatives and different ways of moving through the world and moving through our present circumstances and everything. And futurists, by definition, are looking at different ways to examine our society using our technology and trying to extrapolate things to create blueprints and roadmaps for us, right? But with the Afrofuturist lens, this is done through a different lens, right? This is Afrofuturism is Black culture. It's the Black imagination. It's one that critiques the present, that's rooted in the past, but always looks to the future. My friend Tananarive Due says that, just for Black folks, just the very act of us imagining ourselves into the future is an act of resistance. And I love that. So rooted in the Black imagination. I like to say, actually, I tend to tell people, I work alongside fellow Afrofuturists, right? They're my neighbors. And so I work at Kepler, I work in the Alchemy and the Cafe Creative initiatives, the arts initiatives. And what are we doing? We're getting together as neighbors to create change and build community wealth and to transform not just communities, but minds. And that's what I love about introducing myself as the Afrofuturist. It represents a public statement. It represents an attitude and a mindset of not just organization, but of the community as a whole. And it's about creating the desired future states, the worlds we want to see now. So one of the things I've come to realize is we live in a culture that doesn't value imagining. It doesn't value dreaming as a skill set, right? We live in systems that are past reform and that require radical reimagining, and that's the hard work that we'll be doing and beginning here. And I love I love how Ms. Dixon ended our last session with this quote. We cannot create what we cannot imagine. And Lucille Clifton said that. We cannot create what we cannot imagine. That's what we're going to be doing today, right? This is how I approach creating stories. I'm a storyteller, right? This is what I do. And so I often get asked, how do I come at story? And for me, a lot of my stories begin with this whole idea of world building. And that's what the whole premise of this time together is. Now, normally I run this thing as a workshop. I'll give you like exercises and time to reflect back on what we talk about. And that's why I've handed out handouts, because you know what? The seminar, homework for you, all right? But we're still gonna go through this like I normally would. All right, so if I was to say, well, even when I'm sitting down to write Sweep of Stars, for example, you know, I'm not just gonna sit there and just like immediately just jump in and just start building stuff. No, well, kind of yes, but no. You know, if I tell you to build something, you're gonna take some time, you know, to think about what it is. You're not just gonna, if I have you go build a building, you're not just gonna grab some bricks and go, let me have at it. No, you're gonna take some time, you're gonna think about it, you're gonna plan, and that's this process that I wanna take everybody through today. And so for our purposes, world building is the process by which we create an imaginary world or build a fictional universe. And this is how I approach my world building as a creative, but this is how I approach my world building as a community organizer, right? You're gonna see a lot of parallels in what we do. All right, so setting the setting. And one of the things I was thinking, actually, was, I believe it was Brian, who of course I catch him while he's, you know, switching his outfits. But one of the things that Brian was saying that got me thinking in this seminar was this whole idea of everything requires a context, right? And that's what I think storytelling, that's when I think about world building, the worlds we create, that's the context in which we're going to tell our stories, right? And so, you know, just in broad strokes, when it comes to like, when it comes to fiction, for example, we normally start at this place, like if you're starting with realistic fiction, we start at this place what we call consensus reality, right? That's what we all agree to, the day-to-day world that we live in. So like if I'm writing a detective story set in Indianapolis, that's pretty much the, you know, consensus reality is like, all right, so I may not live in Indianapolis, but I understand what a city is. All right, I got it, not too much world building required. But the more I move away from that shared experience, the more background details I have to start providing for the reader. And the reason I bring this up is because that's where our work is, right? As we think about the ideas of utopia, as we think about the ideas of desired future states, where are we starting from? We're starting from this consensus reality. And one of the things about this consensus reality is that we live in the product of someone's imagination. That's where we find ourselves right now. So writers must develop an imaginary setting that's logical. It's a place with vision and purpose. So how many of you recognize any of these worlds? If you can recognize some of these worlds, shout them out for me. I hear Narnia. We hear Wakanda. Hogwarts, yes. Middle Earth. The last one seems to be tricky. We got Hogwarts. Westeros from Game of Thrones. Oh, I love my nerds. But the thing about it is each of these worlds, they weren't created haphazardly. None of the worlds that are inhabited are created haphazardly. Each world was created with a vision and a purpose. Each world has its own worldview, and that's what we're going to be examining. So when we talk about dystopia and utopia, you know, part of the way I tend to reframe it in my own head is this conversation, right? It's a conversation between what some scholars call Afro-pessimism versus Afrofuturism. Right, and so more often than not, when we look at science fiction stories by Black creatives, you know, we seem to see a lot more dystopian visions, right? Because why is that? I mean, it seems to be that the dystopia is the default state for a lot of Black communities, and we mirror that in our fiction. In fact, some might argue that we rely too much on dystopia as a reaction, as a trauma reaction to white supremacy. But the rise of Afro-pessimism, it actually speaks to all of this, and actually I hear it when I talk to other nonprofits, right? You hear the sentiment of like, well, we're so busy trying to survive today, we don't have time to think about tomorrow. We aren't allowing ourselves that space and that time to dream. And that's what Afrofuturism is for me. But we listened to the words of Adrienne Maree Brown. She was the author of a book called Emergent Strategy, and she was also one of the co-editors of Octavia's Brood, which is a collection of short stories that take the springboard from Octavia's work and applying it to community work. But she said, Octavia understood that these are the conditions that emerge when we are trapped in the imagination of racists, fundamentalists, and smart people addicted to hierarchy. People who don't think of the whole. We have to claim the space to imagine ourselves beyond this world. That being said, there's plenty that Afro-pessimism teaches us, right? Two of my favorite books, An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon and Parable of the Sower, they teach us a lot. So keep in mind, these stories of these dystopian works, right? They teach us about resilience. They're tales of resilience. They teach us through their main characters. These characters maintain their agency. They remain adaptive in the moment. No matter what the circumstances of this dystopian world throws at them, they adapt to that moment. They triumph in that moment. And that's what I love about these two books. And so while our goal here might be best aimed at creating possible utopia, I think of it as a dream waiting to be imagined into existence. That's how I approach it. When we think about utopias, they're all dreams. They're all ideals. And they're waiting for us not just to imagine, but to imagine into existence. Now, to overcome the way that society remains unequal, there has to be visions of a future where the problems are solved. That's what we love about Star Trek, right? For all my Star Trek people out there. Yeah, thank you. And I know there's more of you out there. That's what we love about Star Trek. It's a world we start in a world where a lot of our problems have been solved. It creates it's painting a picture for us of like, hey, you know what? It can be done. We can get to that point. And it's important that we have these sort of visions that let us know, hey, there's a world waiting to be created by us, a world that is waiting for us to live into. There are no rules in writing. Let me just start by saying that. There are no rules. If someone tells you there's rules to writing, just start tuning them out in that moment. But there are two things I try to keep in mind as I go about doing my work. And my basic rule of thumb is you have to out-imagine your reader. And why is that important? Because in times of collapse, there are opportunities to reimagine and to rebuild. In times of collapse, in times of chaos, and I love thinking about it. Okay, I love chaos. There's that. But one reason why I love chaos so much is because chaos represents opportunity to me. When there's chaos, when people are running around and you don't think that, and things seem to be collapsing, there's opportunities there. If you have a vision, there's opportunities there to push that vision forward. And let's face it, in the times of, this great other that comes in that we refer to as a pandemic, when things cause our systems to start to collapse, when we have these events that say, hey, the systems we put in place, the illusions that we live our life by don't actually work, right? Institutions are going to be like, oh, hey, these aren't working. We need some new ideas. Where can we go? What can we do? And there's a certain amount of desperation that comes that's involved in that moment. And I love moments of desperation. That's where I thrive. I was going to make a joke about that's how I stayed married for 22 years, but I'm not going to make that joke. But as we're doing this, as part of creating that vision is, all right, we have to out-imagine our reader. We have to out-imagine, it sounds bad. We have to out-imagine our funders. We have to out-imagine. Part of why we have to do all this out-imagining is because that's what helps us create this vision. And even as we're going around building this vision, you have to kind of imagine your funders, your readers, your target audience as a tourist in this world that you're trying to create, as a tourist going, hey, what's that? Why is that there? How has this come to be? Again, it's all part of that process of putting stories together. So where do we start? Normally when I encounter, when I'm teaching class to like new writers and everything, You know, the blank page is an intimidating space, right? It's intimidating, and it can overwhelm young writers because with a blank page, you can do anything. Anything is possible with a blank page. Doesn't matter, you can bring any big idea, you can bring any wild idea and bring it to the blank page, because what's gonna separate out a bad idea from a good idea? Well, actually, there are no bad ideas. It's just a matter of, hey, can I make this work? All right, so with Sweep of Stars, you know what? I'm gonna bring any big idea I can to this. You know what? I'm gonna have starships powered by jazz music. Because why not? It's a blank page. I can do whatever I want. And my job as a writer then is to make that world logical. And so by the time you get to by the time you get to starships powered by jazz music, you're just sitting there going, yeah, of course. Yeah, why wouldn't you have starships powered by jazz music? Duh. And so I spent like about a year and a half actually building that world, the world that you see in Sweep of Stars, a year and a half. And yes, a lot of times writing has this image of me in my basement toiling away by myself. But me building this world and me doing most of my research and doing my world building, it's me dreaming alongside my community, right? So I'm talking to my neighbors. I'm talking to the folks at Khepra. I'm talking to the folks of the Learning Tree. And I'm saying, hey, what is it we're working towards? Right? Have we ever stopped and asked ourselves, what if we win? What does that look like then? What do we want to have happen? And so we get to start dreaming about these things. Like, oh, what if we could reimagine schools? What if we could reimagine economics? Why not? Why not do that? And so when we come to this writing, creating these worlds, I start with a big idea. What is the big question? What's a single question that you're asking? What is the question that you want to explore in your work? What is the what if? I call it the what if. That speculative element of your story. What is that thing, that idea that you want to explore? And for example, one of my big things was, what if I could reimagine our economic system? I had a lot of fun thinking about what the implications of that would look like. But you have to have something that you want to examine in your work in order for your story to take place. Either your character or your society that you're building, you want to examine some big issue. And you have to create a world that challenges your characters, because we live in a world that's created by someone's imagination that challenges us, that keeps us on our journey, or prevents us, or creates obstacles for our journey, right? This is the world we live in, and so this is the thing we think about as we're creating these worlds. How do we challenge people? And more importantly, what is that challenge from getting from where we are now in our consensus reality to that ideal? All right, so normally, like I said, normally I do this as a workshop, and we have like 3 rounds of designing things. And so we will sort of think through not as a group, because we don't have time for all of that, but I'm just gonna go through some of the topics that we normally think through as a group. So round 1 would be, all right, let's just build a world. And I mean that literally. We would start with, and just flat out just build a world. Like the physical world that we would inhabit. So what does that look like? So, I'm trying to think how I would do that. Because we start from nothing, right? And so we have to start building this, start putting the pieces into place a bit at a time. And so we would start by sketching out some areas that we want to explore. So if I'm saying let's build a world, if it's a planet, introduce us to it. Like I said, we can start big. What galaxy are we living in? What planet are we living in? And we can power that all the way down. What country are we living in? What state? What city? This is what I love about world building. All right. Sorry, I'm thinking about this out loud, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I love world building so much. I get to play God. And I kind of love that. I'm not gonna lie. I've written over a dozen books, And I'm like, ooh, each book is an opportunity for me to create. Each time is an opportunity for me to create a brand new world. And it is our moment, like, hey, if I had the chance to do this, here's what I would do. So we would walk through this, as a country, a city, as a neighborhood. We would think through what it would look like as we would lay it out in our world. And then after that, we would think about, so with that physical world, things exist for a reason, right? I can't just have a world that it has orange skies just because it's a cool image. Okay, I have done that. But once I decide, I want to have a world that has an orange sky, I have to have a reason for why that exists. And so I have to go back and do that research to sort of paint that picture, to fill in those blanks about why it is that it is. Because the world tells us something about us as people. Because once you've laid out the world, what have you done in that world? Well, you have people groups that inhabit this world, people groups that are separated somehow or another. Sometimes it's by a river, sometimes it's by mountain ranges, sometimes it's by artificial borders that we call nations, right? These have been laid out for a reason. And so we think about that when we create our world. And then once we have this world that has been laid out, then we start thinking about, all right, so in this world, who actually would live here? And this is my favorite part of world building, because this is where I get to think through all the different aspects of what does it mean to create a worldview? What does it mean to create the customs that the society comes to live by? And most importantly, what does it look like for me to reimagine systems in this moment? And the reason why I love this so much as a community organizer is because, just think about that as an exercise. Let us reimagine systems, right? All right, so we have a governing system in this world. Let's reimagine what a governing system could look like. What are the economics of this world? Some things will have value, and these things that have value will say a lot about a society, about a culture. In Sweep of Stars, in my ideal world, what is the thing that's valued most in the economy? Relationships. So if people are the things that are valued most in this world, and how does the economics work? It's by how do we value each other in relationship, right? And you're like, wait, what? And I'm like, exactly, because I came to a blank page with my imagination and go, you know what? Why can't we have a world that's not transactional? Why can't we have a world where people value each other so much, and how transactions get done is via our love for one another? Why can't we do that? So that's how I approach the world. That's how I approach the education system. Hey, I get to reimagine an education system. What could that look like? Well, that's why it's good to have friends like Diamond Harges and the Learning Tree and go, ooh, what would it look like if the Learning Tree won? And that was the way we could educate our people. We have to out-imagine our readers. So then I would normally take people through a time of reflecting on what this means. What does, we start creating these worlds, and I would have normally given you a lot of time to think about your own worlds, because each and every one of you would be creating your own world. What would it look like physically? And then what would the cultural mores of that world look like? And then once you've thought about that, it's like, all right, so I have this dream, I have this vision that's sort of, it's kind of nebulous right now, and I know there's a lot more work to be done as I fill in the details and everything. But this is the ideal world. This is what I would love to work towards. But we're here in this consensus reality, and I want to get there. So now what are the next steps for me? And that's when I would have you start creating a timeline and a roadmap of what would it look like to get from where we are now to your ideal. What could that look like? Because like I said, we exist in this consensus reality, but we don't have to stay in this reality. We can build and work towards something. And so what we would reflect on is what would those steps look like to get from here to there. I know even in writing Sweep of Stars, it's actually impacted me as an individual, because one of the things in this community is they greet each other by saying, I see you. And when they depart from one another, they say goodbye by saying, I appreciate you. And just in the year and a half of writing this book, you start thinking through that, and it's like, oh, wait, that's a piece of my world I can start now. I see the people in front of me. My students in the middle school, wait, there are 15 individual students in this room, which means I have 15 individual curricula for those students, because I see each and every one of them individually. And when they leave my classroom, I appreciate each and every one of them individually. Because even though my world is 100 years from now and starting on the moon and spreading out to Titan and out into a wormhole and across the galaxy, there are pieces I can start now in getting to that state. So like I said, our job is to out-imagine our reader. We want to give them a clear picture, a clear reality that they can work towards. And one of the things I want to leave with you is that this whole idea of taking your ideas, taking the dreams, taking this idea of utopia that each and every one of us has, picture that so clearly that we can start working towards that individually. Or we can start working towards that together. I mean, we're a series of collectives. We don't have to work in silos. We can work together to start creating some of these dreams and some of these realities together. And we have to allow room in ourselves and in our organizations to dream about what possibilities could be. We have to allow ourselves these rooms to imagine ourselves, and that is just at the heart of what it means to create a better future. So the hope inspired by Afrofuturism keeps us from despair. And in order to create radical change, we have to be able to envision it, to create a space to imagine and dream of possible futures, to join together to build a better tomorrow together, imagining pathways of healing for our future. That's the hope of Afrofuturism. That's the hope that it brings to my community work, and that's the hope it brings to my writing. That's the hope it brings to me as an individual. And I want to end with this quote by Octavia Butler, because it just impacts it impacts so much of who I am and what I like to do and what I want to be about, and that is, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting change, the only lasting truth is change. God is change. So go forth and be the change. Thank you.